Wave 2 of the DLC Booster Course Pass has just released, and I think it's fair to say that this wave is way better than the first wave. Not only has Nintendo constructed these courses with a lot more care, but the overall selection is much more favourable. Like with the last wave, I'm gonna rank these tracks from worst to best based on my opinion, and at the end I'll show a tier list of how I feel Wave 2 tracks rank against Wave 1 tracks. So without further ado, this is what I consider to be the worst track in Wave 2. High Sundae was by far the biggest disappointment of the DLC. Much like Ninja Hideaway, this was a new track for the series that would later appear in Mario Kart Tour, but actually debuted in this wave of DLC. So to say I was hyped would be an understatement. However, this track fails on so many levels.
My disappointment is immeasurable, and my day is ruined.
The entire layout is one giant loop, with almost no shortcuts, and on top of that, the entire track is played in anti-gravity, meaning that everything feels too floaty. And since half the track is just constant trick ramps, a lot of the track feels like you're just waiting to fall. And can we talk about this section? Why is there an option to go below the wafers? Like, it's way more difficult to pull off and saves no time at all. The saving grace for this course, at least for me, is this cool shortcut you can do. You can pull it off in both 150 and 200cc, so I guess that's kinda cool. But aside from that, there's nothing that exciting about this track. Mario Circuit 3 is the track no one asked for, but we got anyway, and not surprisingly, it became one of the most tracks in the game. Traversing the track is decently fun, as there's many twists and turns, with a lot of shortcut potential if you have a mushroom. However, none of these shortcuts are particularly fun to pull off, at least compared to some of the others in this wave of DLC. I mentioned this in my impressions video, but I'll say it again, there's nothing about this remake that makes it feel exclusive to Mario Kart 8. At the least they could have added an anti-gravity section to spruce it up, but without it, this feels like it could be in any game. I was surprised to find out that more than half of the GBA tracks have never come back in any other Mario Kart, as a lot of these tracks are way more developed than Super Circuit tracks, yet would have so much potential if they were remade in 3D. So I'm glad to say this remake of Snowland is everything I wanted it to be. It being 6th is only because the rest of the tracks are really good. The track is on the short side, but there's tons of fun shortcuts packed into it, with my favourite being this one. And can we talk about the visuals? Overall, the track design is pretty simple, but the combination of the icy road and crystals in the background create a wonderful environment to drive around on. On top of that, the addition of having the item boxes cruise across the track is really neat, as sometimes you can line it up really well and grab 2 or more item boxes. The track is really fun to drive on, but its short length and basicness holds it back. Waluigi Pinball has always been a fan favourite, which is why it pains me to put it at number 5, but personally I've never had the same attachment to it as other fans of the series. I definitely like this track for its unique theming, bright and vibrant colours, tight track design that produces very intense moments, and its finale where you end up in the pinball machine. However, I've always felt the track is lacking a few things. First of all, there's no shortcuts. This becomes very apparent when doing time trials. The only place to use your mushroom is the pinball section to help you avoid the pinballs. Secondly, not really a criticism of the track, but I feel like they could have added more things to the pinball section. When I think of a pinball table, I see all the crazy tracks and things you can hit. Compared to most pinball tables, Waluigi Pinball is pretty basic. I just wish there was more things to interact with on the track. Out of all the tracks, Kalimari Desert seems to have the most amount of work put into it, with various improvements over the original, such as the graphics and atmosphere of the desert. Like seriously, the desert looks really good, which elevates this track even more. Then there's the obvious improvement of having a different lap each time. The original uses the train more as an obstacle, which can be pretty punishing, but that definitely fits the vibe of Mario Kart 64. Whereas this version uses the train to ensure a variety of ways to traverse traverse the track. Coupled with that are jump ramps, which gives the player more options to traverse the track. Ultimately, it always feels like you're in control of whether you'll hit the train, which is what makes this track feel so much better than an already stellar original. This being the first course in Wave 2 set my expectations of the wave very high. I'm glad to say overall the wave definitely achieved the expectations I set for it. Obviously every track wasn't as good as this one, but most tracks are around the same level of quality as this one. From the get-go, there's an amazing collection of references to the Mario franchise. My favourite of course being Donkey Kong, the best musical. I don't know if that's a translation issue or if that's the best they had, but regardless, I love it. Then there's the luscious park, which I assume is supposed to be Central Park. It's pretty small, but I'm not complaining. Overall, the course is pretty simple, but I just love how compact it is, yet how big the course ends up feeling. A lot of laps reuse the same areas, however, going backwards and forwards mixes it up enough that each lap feels unique. To be honest, most of my love for this track comes from playing it on 200cc. Play it on 200cc and you'll realize how chaotic and intense it becomes. Initially, when making my booster course pass wishlist, I thought Mushroom Gorge would be a decent pick, but nothing special. I was definitely wrong, as I was surprised at how much fun this track is within Mario Kart 8. One thing that always confused me about this track was that it was featured in Mushroom Cup, supposedly the easiest cup in the game. Nevertheless, this is quite a hard track within Mario Kart Wii, and it stays somewhat hard within Mario Kart 8, but the spacing and size of the mushrooms has definitely been changed to accustom the more casual player base of Mario Kart 8. Regardless of how it's become easier, the track is still an absolute blast. The physics of Mario Kart 8 makes it way easier to control your kart in midair. Recently, I've been playing Mario Kart Wii, and I think it's fair to say midair kart control is pretty difficult. So when playing this version, the cave section feels a lot more fun to traverse. Some shortcuts have been cut from this version of the track, like this one. But honestly, who expected that to be in this version? But it seems Nintendo was aware of the gap jump, as they've put a barricade to stop people. However, despite my attempts, this shortcut is very possible. Perhaps even harder, which in my opinion makes up for the rest of the track not being as hard. As a local Aussie, I'm so glad this track is really good, whilst also showing off the city and culture pretty well. Granted, there's no giant banana in here, but I'll let it slide as this track is fun without it. Each lap is very different to one another, because unlike New York Minute, which pretty much uses the same area each lap, this track is split off into many different areas, with the second lap being almost completely different to the other laps. My favourite section of the track is this section by the beach, that requires a lot of skill to traverse effectively, especially in 200cc. But aside from that, there's plenty of memorable sections in this track. There's the ramps you go under and over, the giant toad riding the Yoshi, flying in and out of the Opera House, and gliding over the harbour. The one thing holding this track back is that at some points it feels a bit too long, but that's far and few between the amazing track design that's put on display here. So overall, this wave was really good. There was only one outright bad track, with the rest of the tracks being pretty good. Here's a tier list of all the tracks throughout the DLC. Nothing so far has reached the quality of Shroom Ridge, but most of the tracks are within either A or B. You probably haven't noticed since it's been so long, but my rankings from Wave 1 have changed a bit, and I'm sure that's a trend that will continue with future waves, as my opinions on these tracks are never concrete. Anyways, that's probably all the videos I'll create for this wave of DLC, but right now I'm working on another Mario Kart video about custom tracks in Mario Kart Wii, so subscribe and don't miss out on that.